Hello and welcome to this demo. So in this demo we'll be looking at a small demonstration for using the for each enumerator. It is one of the data transformation techniques. Okay, so let's quickly fire up Bridge. Okay, so we'll create a new project and call this as for each demo integration services project. Click on OK. So what we would be essentially be doing in this small demo is that we'll take a particular folder which has some files in it, and we are going to read from each and every file and push it to a database. So essentially, if you have say 4 or 5 files in a particular folder, we are going to iterate that folder 5 times and take the data from it and finally push it to a database. So here is where your for each enumerator comes into picture. So if you look at the control for control flow items, you will find for each loop container. So I'm going to drag and drop this, and before that I also need to prepare some input data. So I'll navigate to demos, files. So here we had prepared a Excel file, so I'm going to just make use of that same thing. So let me just create a text file called as say for each demo, and what I'm going to do over here is take all the data from this file which we created in our first demo and paste it into this. So we have good data now. I'll close up Excel and I'll create about 4 or 5 copies. Okay, so once you have this for each loop container, let's set this up. Right click on this and click on edit. So if you navigate to your collection option, you'll find an enumerator options in this. You'll have for each item enumerator, ADO enumerator, and so on and so forth. So we would be interested in for each file enumerator, since we are going to enumerate files in this. And let me just navigate to demos, files, demo 4, and here I'm basically interested in my text file, so I'll give it a star.txt, and in my variables mapping I need to store these file names in a particular variable, so that each time I enumerate through the folder, I take the file name, store it in a variable, and then give it to a data flow task, and it does the job of pushing it into a database. So this will be repeated 5 times, so these 5 file names should be stored in a variable each time it enumerates. Okay, so I'm just creating a new variable. I'll call this as file path and let it be a string. So we have set this up. Now what I'm going to do is, let me just drag drop a data flow task. Since we are going to migrate data from our text files to a database, let me just drag drop a data flow task, and let me just edit this. So once you click on edit, you see the tabs changing over here to data flow. So first and foremost, what I need to do is set up a connection, right? So our source is a text file, so I'll click on flat file connection, and I'll call this as file connection, and just for the sake of it I need to give a file path name, so I'll give this as for each demo.txt, and these are the columns, and you could also preview the data. So we have a file connection set up right now. what we need to do is we need to tell to configure the file connection in such a way that it's going to read from the variable. So in our for each loop container, we are storing the path in the variable. So this connection manager should take the path from the variable itself, right? So in expressions, if you see in our properties window, you'll have a connection string property, and if you just look at the variables, you'll find your custom created variable over here. So I'll just drag and drop this over here and click on OK. So what this is basically going to do is that our for each loop container is going to pick a file from our folder, store it in a variable, and is going to supply that particular file path to this connection manager, right? So this will be repeated 5 times, as we have around 5 files in our folder. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'll drag and drop a flat file source, and I need to configure this. So I'll say a flat file connection manager, and it's going to automatically detect the columns in it. So we'll be pushing this to a database. So let me just drag and drop OLADB destination and connect this. I'll click on edit, and I'll choose my SQL 08.demodb. This is the data connection that I created in my previous demos, so I can actually see it over here. I'll click on OK, and I need to also give a table name. So I'll create a new table called as say for each, and I could actually change the column names. For now I'm just keeping it as it is. You could revisit the mappings. So these are the available inputs. So we have a very lame column names over here, column 0, column 1. We could actually modify this, but let's keep this as it is for now. I'll click on OK. So to summarize, what we did is that we have a data flow task that is going to execute as many times as the number of files we have in that particular folder. So we are going to pick up a file name, store it in a variable, the path actually, and supply it to this flat file source, and it's going to in turn take the data, push it to a database, and this whole process will be repeated 5 times since we have 5 files. Okay, so let us just debug this package. So we could see it flicker a number of times, and as we saw in our Excel sheet, we had around about 15-16 columns. 15-16 rows, I'm sorry, and so we also have around 15 to 16 rows in our text file, and we have 5 such text files. So we should have around about 70 plus rows in our database, since it must have enumerated these files one by one, taken the rows and actually pushed it into our database. So if we just refreshed our table, we should find our new table that is created, and if I select the top 1000 rows, let's see 85 rows. So it's a cool way of enumerating through a folder. So that's it. That's pretty much how it is, and pretty much simple to use the for each loop container. Thank you.